Michigan's had 3 spring practices thus far, and now that we are into it, we finally got an opportunity to talk to the head coach himself, Sherrone Moore, who got to dish a little bit on where the Wolverines stand as we look forward to the April 19th spring game and beyond, certainly August 30th against New Mexico thus forward. So we'll talk about it right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Holt, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, was in Ann Arbor this morning for the Sherrone Moore press conference, where I don't think he necessarily said anything that's particularly groundbreaking, right? The biggest thing that we got to hear about was Rod Moore. He didn't count him out for the spring, but as he said, he's recovering well. I'm looking forward to him doing it. And said that we'll see about if he's going to play in the spring, but said that he feels good about him being ready for the fall, which I think is absolutely necessary. Think back to 2023. Rod Moore injured, didn't really start getting going until week 5. Week 4 actually, against Rutgers, and then a bigger role, but still as a reserve against Nebraska, and didn't really kind of come into his own until that week 6 and then week 7 game or week 8 games, the Minnesota and Michigan State game. So Michigan obviously needs him, but the great news for the Wolverines is they've got plenty of bodies in the safeties room. Obviously you want your best one, and I would say Rod Moore obviously is the best one that they have. He's one of the biggest leaders you can expect. I would expect him to be a team captain again this year, but that he's looking at coming back here. We're just going to kind of go through and give thoughts on a lot of the things that he said or that was asked about. He did say that Evan Link is working at left tackle, but also right. They're just kind of working out and trying to figure out what that's going to be. But he says what the good thing about the offensive line is what the defensive line kind of provides for the Wolverines. Now here's the thing: they've only gotten. They've gotten in pads once, but they were doing what he called thud. So it wasn't tackle yet. So it's tomorrow's the second day in pads. So it's not like they've got a ton there, but he said that, it's still a wait and see scenario for Evan Link to see where he ends up as far as that's concerned. I asked him about Bryce Underwood and just the abilities. This is kind of like, similar to what I had asked, Jim Harbaugh in 2021, except for I was a little bit more clear here because I learned my lesson when I tried to ask, like, what does Cade McNamara do that maybe JJ doesn't know yet, or like what can fans not see that Cade McNamara can do? And I wanted him to say like, oh, he can make the pre-snap reads, he can do the protection calls, whatever. So I just asked more so about the pre-snap reads and protection calls, and he didn't really say a heck of a lot. He just said that Bryce works his tail off. He's in here late, in early, and and that there's a lot of competition at the position. But he really said the best part for Bryce is that he's in school and he's getting acclimated to the college experience now. I think that will pay dividends. It's one of those things that you probably just don't really talk about, is how much that would actually kind of help things out in terms of when the fall comes, because that's a big difference. If you're a late enrollee, you come in for summer conditioning, you get to enroll in summer, and you miss some of fall camp because you've got your classes in the bridge program and all of that stuff, and then you're trying to manage the mix of classes and football at the same time. Bryce is already getting a taste of that, so I think that that's one of those things that we can look at and say, okay, that's actually pretty positive. Wow, I got a typo in here with Derek Moore. I typed this out in my car. Let's just be honest. This isn't, I kind of am moving off some of the things that he, like, people want to talk about TJ Guy and Derek Moore. We've kind of done that to some degree. And, but what I found more interesting is that Sherrone says, I think there'll be a dynamic duo in college football next year, along with Dom Nichols and Cam Brandt. Those guys have showed up just as much as they have. I feel like we've got 4 guys on the edge that are going to be pretty good. So we'll extrapolate that for a second, because obviously that's kind of what we're accustomed to seeing, is Michigan having that depth. and they're not always household names, right? You look at 2023. Let's go back to 2022. It was Mike Morris and Ayabi Oki. And then you had some Jalen Harrell and Braden McGregor, but they weren't necessarily really just flying off the page. But then the next year it was those exact two as the starters. And then you got to see a little bit more of, Derek Moore and I don't even remember who the next one was because it really wasn't any of the others there. But they tend to want to have four guys at edge, maybe more, but that's essentially kind of what you want to see. So the fact that he's mentioning, this is the second time we've heard about Dom Nichols in the last couple days. We didn't do a pro day episode, but that was one of the things I asked about Dom Nichols, or actually I just asked what guys asked TJ Guy, what guys in your room are really impressing you? And he's like, you mentioned Dom Nichols, you mentioned Devin Baxter, you mentioned Lugard Pai, but it was like, but Dom is just kind of like, we're actually counting on him. Like he's really just in that place where you're just like, yeah, that's the guy that we really need to stand out. So with that in mind, it's just like, okay, you can count on Dom Nichols to be one of those guys. Now, that's one of those things where you read in between the lines with some of these names that are mentioned. Like Sherrone didn't, because he wasn't asked about the breadth of the defensive tackle depth or anything like that. But when you've got Wink mentioning like a one multiple times, it's like, okay, that's a dude. You've got Dom Nichols being mentioned by multiple people multiple times. Those are dudes, right? That's kind of how you look at it, is to have some of those things where it's just like, okay, that name just keeps getting mentioned. So you just kind of have to remember, like, that's going to be it. And with Pro Day, by the way, it was someone else. I think it was Josiah Stewart that had mentioned Dom Nichols as well. We already talked about TJ Guy mentioning him. So it's just names that just keep on popping off the page and makes you think like, all right, that is probably going to be a better situation than people think. So I think that he's going to be a name to look out for. And it's going to be exciting to see what that defensive line looks like entirely, pretty much. So, all right, we're gonna continue on with the things that Sherrone Moore said, reacting to some of his I don't want to say grander statements. There wasn't anything like particularly, like I said, unbelievably groundbreaking, but we can kind of glean an idea of where things are by just kind of extrapolating off of what he said. So we're gonna get to more here in just a moment. But before we do, daylight savings time snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling lost, you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, you're going to do that if you're watching Michigan basketball because all their games tip off at midnight. Squeezing in a round of golf after work or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late watching a bunch of tournament games, and then I feel like I got to decompress and watch some TV, and 5 Hour Energy helps me keep up the next day. With longer days, I also love getting outside to walk Zuri or whatever that might be, to just kind of get out and get the sunlight as long as it's not Michigan out there. Tropical Burst is my go-to for a quick boost. So head over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Well, grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, so we could go into like the Jayshon Barham. How much more can be added to Jayshon Barham's plate? And he's just like, we just got to get him on the field. Yada, yada, yada. I don't really care about that. Here's where I really want to hone in right now for the next couple minutes. Is he was asked about Jamar Browder, who was the one who got mentioned by TJ Guy on Wednesday as having this big play. And Sherrone, we'll talk. This is what Sherrone had to say about Browder as well as the rest of the receivers. He said, I feel like that group has really obviously grown in size. That was an emphasis for me. I wanted big receivers, and with him and Donaven McCulley and bringing in Jacob Washington, even Andrew Marsh. He's not a small guy. Andrew Marsh is 6 foot even. He's a long-limbed guy. I feel like we bring in some really good size in that group to help us be more explosive in the passing game, and that's what I wanted. And those guys have made plays, and it's been fun to watch, and it's been great for our defense and great for our DBs to go with guys that are bigger because, as we know, in the games that matter, you're going to have to play really big dudes that can go get the football up in the air. So it's been awesome, and it's been very encouraging to watch them all. Now, obviously, you'd love to hear like, yeah, just everybody's just they're the fastest, they're the tallest, they're all that kind of thing. That's not what was kind of what was going on there, but still, I think that that's a really good place to kind of be, though. Just the idea of like getting bigger, getting taller. They want to keep the speed, and it, just there's a little bit of a mentality change in terms of even after he was gone, the Josh Gaddis speed and space, more diminutive receiver had kind of been the law of the land when it came to Michigan receivers. And even though they've had some taller guys like Cornelius Johnson, I mean, Roman Wilson wasn't short, but he wasn't like Donaven McCulley and Jamar Browder, right? Like to be able to go out and get guys that are big, and then you look and they're trying to get I can't remember his name. That there was a transfer that's also 6'5" that everyone's kind of going after. Names on the tip of my tongue, I can't remember it, but just the fact that they're going for size, I think that's an important thing, right? That they're like, okay, we're gonna have that shift of mentality. We're going to do different things, and then when you add that and you talk about what Chip Lindsey brings to the table, this is one of the things that he said. He's a super smart football mind, a guy that understands the game. He's done it in different ways. He's been in different positions. Really helps me because he's been a head coach in a high school and in college and has been a coordinator. So there's a lot less things that I feel that I have to be in the room for and be around. He's just done a really good job at the command of everything. He knows what he wants. He knows what we should be collaborative about and knows what he thinks we should do this way or do that way and collaborate about different things. And then further talking about Chip Lindsey, he said, I'm just kind of pulling out, he's like, it just feels like we're progressing and trying to get better at football instead of like it being some kind of massive offensive overhaul. Every day there's things that we've done, there's things that we haven't done, so it's a mix, and I feel good about where the guys are. I feel like we're going to be explosive in the run and pass, but we'll see how it all looks when we get to the fall. I think that's just going to bode really well in terms of just the mixture of the receivers, the mixture of just everything, I think is going to end up working out. And I think it's going to look better than a lot of people think. Lost my screen here. So I'm excited about the prospect of what the receiving core could be with, like, it's hard to rely on freshmen. And, you're looking at both Andrew Marsh as well as Jamar Browder now. But I think that if they can implement kind of what they're thinking, it very well could work out. Now, am I completely enticed by the room? I'm not, right? They've got a lot of work to do as far as that's concerned. But I still think that that's a room that could end up surprising once everything's said and done, because they have made additions, right? This isn't a scenario like last year where it was like, well, none of these guys have done it, but we'll see if they can. I mean, it's still partially the case, but Don McCulley's got some production. They'll be bringing in the off season Andrew Simpson from UMass, who's got some production. They're still going to be looking at the transfer portal for guys who've got some production, right? And then you have guys that have a lot of potential. So it'll be interesting to see, especially with Chip Lindsey, a guy who does come in. That's why I brought him up here. That comes in and says, okay, what do I got? How can I make this work? It's not Brady Hoke with Rich Rod's players of being like, how can we make Denard a drop back passer? How can we not run Devin Gardner? Right? It's not that. It's the opposite of that. It's what can we do to make it so that these players can be at their maximum potential? And I think it's interesting when you hear some of the names, like how that could work. All right, let's move to the next part. I'd asked about Justice Haynes in large part because Dennis Fithian had asked the question on the receivers, and that was the question I had when I raised my hand. But I'm still very intrigued by Justice Haynes, especially having seen him walking the hallways of Schembechler Hall, because he looks like a tank. And Sherrone says something kind of similar. He says, the dude only eats one ingredient foods. That's why he looks like a statue. He takes care of his body in every way. He's a leader off the field, and how he approaches academics and his social life and everything. On the field, he has that mentality about him. You can see his experience and him playing in the big games before and understanding the game and understanding the moment, understanding how to prepare. He brings that to the room and to the offense of the rest of the team. I could not be more excited about him. I know a lot of others are really excited about Jordan Marshall, who he said Jordan Marshall is picked up right where he left off from the ReliaQuest Bowl, so that's good news. I was accused of stargazing when it came to Haynes. Listen, I couldn't care less about stargazing, right? I was the one, like, I know a lot of you have not been OGs following this show since 2018. I was the one sitting there saying Hassan Haskins is going to be like a stud running back back in 2018 when he was a freshman linebacker. Okay. So I couldn't care less about stargazing. I just know if you watch Justice Haynes and what he brings to the table, you should be very excited about that prospect. This is just a weird place, though, to be right now in spring, because I don't know how much we're really going to see that's going to really tantalize you that much. It's going to tickle your eyes when it comes to being able to see what this team is capable of, considering that it's going to be a split squad and everything. So you just need to be able to, hopefully we get to see Bryce and Justice Haynes and Donaven McCulley and come out there and make a couple big plays, and then you expect them to sit down and be like, okay, things look pretty good as far as that's concerned. So let's go. But otherwise it's really hard to glean. And that's why we just pay attention to the names that just constantly get mentioned. All right, so let's continue on with the things that Sherrone Moore had to say in his spring press conference. And we'll get to the rest of the highlights, and we'll do that here in just a moment. But before we do, imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I've just checked the Game Time app, and you can find amazing deals down in Atlanta to see Michigan take on Auburn. So I would highly recommend doing that. The lowest price guarantee is one of and they've got the super deal, and Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better deal elsewhere. And then with seat views before you buy, there's no surprise fees and the lowest price guarantee. Like I just mentioned, you could book that with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. I mean, we touched on it in the first segment, but I mean, again, I'm very excited about the defensive line. It kind of sounds like that's the case for Sherrone Moore. He says Rayshon's done an outstanding job, really great offseason, looks great. And then he also said about Trey Williams and Damon Payne, who we want to hear more about. And I love this. He said, they've just assimilated into the culture. They put their head down and work. They've been great. It's been a very seamless transition for both of them. They've done a great job in the first 3 practices. Okay, that's very inane. And you don't expect them to be like, yeah, no, they're terrible. They're not where we want them to be, and you want them to do good. But still, just at least, okay, they're acclimating to the team and to the culture. That's an important thing, right? Like, you know, above all, especially coming from other schools, because that was kind of how, like, Olu, when you think about Olu coming in 2022, it was like, he gets named a captain coming out of Virginia because it was a large part of, like, he came in and, like, assimilated to what we're trying to do right away. And then he ended up getting everyone's respect as a result of that. All right. Last things that we have to talk about here. There's no rush to naming a starting quarterback. I think that's fine. Right. Like because you do have spring and you have summer conditioning and you can do your workouts and stuff like that. You've got all of fall camp. I don't really think there's a point at this point, especially because you want the Bryce, Mikey Keene scenario to be a true competition that just continues to go and go. So with that, yeah, I would say just let those two battle it out until you get to that New Mexico game. I think that Michigan players are going to rally behind whoever's under center regardless, and I think that's partially a cultural thing. So with that in mind, I think just let them go. I don't think that you really necessarily need to try to quickly get to a starter. Like sometimes I feel like that's sometimes I think it's inhibitive to name a starter early, and sometimes I think it's vice versa. And it just feels like from the Jim Harbaugh era throughout the Jim Harbaugh era, there were times where I felt like there really doesn't seem like there's a point to naming Shea Patterson the starter as early as he did, because you could theoretically ramp up that competition with Brandon Peters. But I guess there's also the question, who do you want to be with your ones? And I think that when you're dealing with a freshman like Bryce Underwood, I think the best thing is to get him some experience with the ones and the twos, and then with Mikey Keene, he can do the same. I think that you need to whittle it down to those two as quickly as possible, even though it sounds like they're just going to roll in not only those guys, but others as well, right? They're going to roll in. I mean, Davis Warren isn't practicing right now, but Jaden Davis, I think to be able to get down to two, I know Jaden Davis is theoretically in the mix, and he's gotten mentions. He got mentions from Chip Lindsey, and, on the podcast before, in the trenches, you had the mention from Sherrone. And I think that that's fine and fair, but you didn't bring in Mikey Keene to not be at worst the backup quarterback, and you didn't bring in Bryce Underwood to not start as soon as you can possibly get him to start. So with that in mind, I think that you just need to really put them in the positions where they're battling for as long as they can, because that's going to only be good for both, right? Because, and this is one of the things that Sherrone said about it, is he says, like, you don't necessarily want to be in a situation where these guys are making mistakes, because that's how you lose the grip on it. You want them to be able to come out and be able to recognize, like, every snap is of the utmost importance. It kind of like makes me think about Tom Brady and what he was saying, like what the late Greg Harden said to him is like, Tom, Brady's saying like, okay, I'm only getting like 3 snaps in practice with the ones or whatever. And Greg Harden says like, well, then you need to make those snaps like the best throws you've ever made. And so he did exactly that. And I think that that's kind of the mentality you want. Like, how do you become a Tom Brady? Well, he just told you, make the most out of every opportunity. And I think that with Bryce, it's because it's such a different scenario, because he knows he's the golden child. He knows he's the king. He knows that he's the heir apparent, right? Like, he might not be the king yet, but he knows that he's going to be in that situation. To put him in a situation that gives him the most ability to get there as fast as you possibly can. I think that would be the most important thing. Linebackers, no mention of Troy Bowles. I don't know if there's anything to read into that, but he said Jimmy Rolder's playing both spots, and he's been awesome. He's been great. Jaden Hood, Cole Sullivan has gotten bigger, has gotten stronger, continues to get better. Nato Wusu is another guy that stands out with Chase Taylor. They're freshmen. And he said it's a deep group, fun group to watch. All big, all long, all athletic. So interesting as far as that's concerned. I think that's pretty much the bulk of it. So my takeaway is it's kind of hard to have these press conferences at this point in stage of the year, because you don't have much to really like, yeah, this is what it looks like. Plus, like, Sherrone comes from the Jim Harbaugh camp where he doesn't really want to tell you much. Like, he'll say some things and you kind of look at it and you say, well, he said that very nice, but he didn't really say a lot. But you can glean little bits and pieces, and it's always going to be noteworthy when the head coach gets to talk to us in the media. That said, I mean, I forgot about Shamari Earls. He says is flashed, and let me see if I can find that real quick. Maybe I can't. I don't know if my search function doesn't work on my second window. He said Shamari Earls is flashed at that other corner. Not necessarily at the other corner, but he's definitely coming along. That's exciting. But I think that that's kind of where you pay attention. What freshman is he mentioning? I mean, he's not going to, Bryce is going to be involved. The fact that he asked about Browder, he mentioned Andrew Marsh. The fact that Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng and Chase Taylor, those are guys who got mentioned by Ernest Hausman last week. Okay, I think I can actually look this up now. I think it's more of a my site is not working the way it wants to. No, it doesn't want to find the one thing I know is absolutely in here. It's always fun to try to do this. Okay, we're just not going to be able to do that. Shamari Earls, getting to hear some of those names, I think it's great to hear it now, because that kind of tells you that it's probably going to be a good situation. Now, hopefully we get to get Sherrone again relatively, I want to say relatively soon, like closer to the end of spring ball. Doesn't always work out that way. But to be able to get like, okay, how did things go? Who are the ones that you feel like really are stepping up and stepping out and are impressing? Because that's going to give us the best clues, maybe not for this year, but for later in the year, maybe next year, who are going to be those guys? Kind of like I said in the mailbag before about the idea of when you're looking for who is going to be, what I'm looking for in a game like this are the names that we heard last year or the year before. Those guys stepping out, Because you think back to 2019, we heard all about Eric Hall and Mikey Sainristil still. Well, it took a couple years for both of those guys to really make their stamp. So like this year, I'm hoping that some of the names that we've been hearing, I hope they step up, like Ike Iwunnah, like Dom Nichols. But I'm also hoping to see Eno Etta and Omarion Walker take those steps, because those are names that have been mentioned in the past as well. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.